Yo, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel, and today I'm going to give you my top starts and sits, my startums and situms heading into week 5 of the 2021 fantasy football season. But before we get into any of the starts and sits, we're going to quickly recap my calls from week 4. There were some good calls and some bad calls. I'm just going to recap them very quickly. I made Derek Carr a start just because I thought I'd have to rely on him a little bit. He had been really he's been pretty productive for fantasy before last week against the Chargers. I liked him as a safe high quarterback 2. He finished as the quarterback 24 with only 15.44 points. So we're going to count that as a miss. I also said I'd start Matthew Stafford as a mid quarterback 1. He finished as the quarterback 15. He was only a couple points away from a top 12 weeks, or a top 12 week. So that was a little bit of a miss, but he was still a decent play. I said to start Chuba Hubbard. If you picked up Chuba Hubbard, you likely picked him up to play him. So I figured most of you were going to play him anyways. He had an okay game, 8.1 points. And by the way, all the points I give are going to be in half-point PPR, 4-point passing touchdown scoring, unless I know otherwise. But he had 8.1 points. He was a running back 36. I said I liked him as a top 20 running back play. So that was another miss. Luckily, things turn around here, guys. It's not all misses. I did say to start Dave Montgomery of the Chicago Bears as a high-end RB2. He finished as the running back 5 on the week, had 22.6 points against the Detroit Lions. That was a massive hit. And unfortunately, he is now out a few weeks with an injury. But we did get a good week out of him against the Detroit Lions. With Christian McCaffrey out for the Carolina Panthers, I said I liked Robby Anderson as a low wide receiver 3, high wide receiver 4 that could be played in a pinch. He finished with only 7.4 fantasy points, the wide receiver 54. He saw 11 targets, but he didn't do much with them. So even though I think the process was right and he did see the targets, it was still a miss because he just didn't produce any points. And then another miss, Mike. Well, man, we had quite a few misses. We have to turn it around. We do have more hits in here, though. Not very many, though. It was a lot of misses last week. Mike Williams, I'm pretty sure everyone out there was starting Mike Williams regardless of whatever I said. He had been on fire. I think he was like the wide receiver 2 at that point. But last week against the Raiders, he finished as the wide receiver 104. I liked him as a high wide receiver 2. He was nowhere near that. He only had 1.6 fantasy points. And yeah, all wide receivers are inconsistent. Every wide receiver, for the most part, has bust games. So I expect Mike Williams to be good moving forward. And this was just a down game, and it was a miss. I will take ownership of that. But I'm pretty sure everyone was starting Mike Williams, unless your team is just absolutely loaded. And then we do have a bright side here. I did say to start Deebo Samuel, coming off a sort of pedestrian game. I said to put him back in your lineup because all wide receivers have bad games from time to time. And he had been fired to that point, and he did not disappoint. He was the wide receiver 2 with 31.7 half PPR points. That was a huge hit. And then I also said to start Tyler Higbee as a low tight end 1. He finished as the tight end 22, only 5.6 points, so that was a miss. I also said to start Logan Thomas, where I don't really want to say if he was a hit or a miss. He left the game like very, very early with an injury. He didn't return, so obviously he's not going to score points if he leaves early. And then looking at the sits for last week, I said to sit Daniel Jones against the Saints. I don't know if many people were starting him, but he finished as a quarterback 6, 27.78 points. He overcame the tough matchup, and that was a miss for me saying to sit him. I said, though, to sit Damien Harris, running back of the Patriots, against the Buccaneers. He was coming off of a matchup against the Saints where he didn't do very well. This was a tough matchup against the Buccaneers. I said to sit Damien Harris. He finished as the running back 50, only scoring 3.6 points. Tampa Bay shut down the running game again, so that was a hit for me. I do like Damien Harris to bounce back, though, this upcoming week, and we will talk about him later in this video. And then I also said to sit Tyson Williams and Latavius Murray against the Denver Broncos. Well, Williams ended up being inactive, which allowed Latavius Murray to see a little bit of volume, actually. It wasn't as much of a split. Latavius played and got most of the work, and he was pretty productive. 18 for 59 on the ground was nothing special, but he did score a touchdown that made him finish as a running back 26, 11.9 points. So that wasn't really a hit or a miss. It's just kind of whatever. So now we recapped last week. I think we're ready to get into the start and sit calls of this upcoming week. All right, so I'm going to start with my starts of the week and then move on to my sits of the week at the end of the video. We're just going to go position by position. I do have a couple quarterbacks that I think you guys should start this week. And obviously, I'm not going to say start Mahomes, because if you have Patrick Mahomes, you're going to be starting him. You know, guys like that. If you have these upper tier, like Devontae Adams, I don't really need to tell you to start them unless they're coming off of like a couple down weeks, and I just need to give you reassurance to play them. So I'm going to try to find some more under the radar guys in this video. And the first player on this list is going to be Kirk Cousins. As you can see, the first 3 weeks, he put up over 20 fantasy points each game, a couple 25-point games there. But week 4, they came out and scored on their first possession of the game. And then after that, against Cleveland, they didn't really do much. He only had 11.1 fantasy points. I do expect a bounce back game in week 5 against the Detroit Lions. The only worry here would be that the Vikings would run the ball and not need to throw the ball very much to win. But Dalvin Cook, the starting running back for the Vikings, his playing status is in question. So if he plays, he might be a little bit limited, and maybe he doesn't play at all, in which case, either way, they might need to rely on the passing game a little bit more. But either way, for me, he's a safe, high quarterback 2 play with some upside if they do need to air out the ball a little bit. All right, next up, our next start of the week is going to be Trey Lance of the San Francisco 49ers. He's getting his first start at the quarterback position this week. He's filling in for an injured Jimmy Garoppolo. He put up quite a few points in limited time after Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt in week 4. He left the game with an injury. Trey Lance came in. He put up 20 points, and I think he only played about 2 quarters. So now he gets his first full start. And as we've seen with guys like Jalen Hurts, the rushing game is so impactful for the quarterback position. Jalen Hurts has had his games where he hasn't been great through the air, but he's been able to salvage that production with his rushing ability. In this game against the Arizona Cardinals, I expect Trey Lance to put up some rushing yards, and if he can put up a decent passing line, he is a great high quarterback to play with some upside. All right, now we're going to move on to the running back position, and yes, we are going to talk about Cordarrelle Patterson. For me, this week against the New York Jets, he is a smash play. He has already been on fire, as you can see from his fantasy points. By the way, this is standard. I'm going to move it to half PPR here because I'm going to talk about things in half PPR. So he's not seeing a ton of carries on the ground. 7 carries to each of the first 3 weeks, 6 carries right there. If you look at his receiving, he's had a decent number of targets, 2, 7, 7, 6. He's had a handful of receptions. Actually, if we do want to look as well at his snap percentage, he's not playing a ton of snaps, you know. He's sitting around like 30 to 40-ish% of snaps. So this isn't like a volume play necessarily, but Cordarrelle Patterson has always been a guy who has big play ability. And against the Jets, they're giving up a ton of fantasy points against running backs. So I expect him to receive at least his usual workload and be productive with that. But another thing to note about this game is that the Atlanta Falcons are going to be without starting wide receiver Calvin Ridley and also wide receiver Russell Gage. So, by the way, this game is in London. I should also mention that if you guys are weary about playing London games, that is another thing to note. So they are going to be traveling to London for this game. But the Jets are bleeding points to running backs, and the Falcons are going to need Patterson to touch the ball. So even if he got his normal volume that he's been getting, I like the matchup. He's been great. Coming off of a 3-touchdown game last week. Obviously, I don't expect that to happen again, but I expect him to be very productive for fantasy in this game, even though in my recent buy low, sell high video, I did say to trade away Cordarrelle Patterson because I do think that this is the peak of his value. I still think he is a very, very solid running back to play with tons of upside against the Jets, as we've seen with some of the performances that he's already put up this year. All right, now we're going to talk about Damien Harris. So of the New England Patriots, he had a couple of down games here against the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'll move it to half PPR here. 2.1 and 3.6 points coming off of a couple of games over the first 2 weeks where he had some decent production. But I'm not going to lie to you guys. I think a lot of us could see these down games coming in those tough matchups. Last week against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I did make him a sit because nobody runs against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the most part, and Damien Harris has limited passing game involvement. So I could really tell that unless he was able to get in the end zone or something against the Buccaneers, that was not going to be a great game for Damien Harris. But this week in week 5, he gets the Houston Texans. This is a way better matchup than anything he's seen over the last couple of weeks. It's more in line with, Miami and New York Jets, and especially in terms of game script, I expect the Patriots to be leading the majority of the game, which would set up a really good game script for them to be able to actually give him volume in this game and return to more of that week 1 and week 2 workload and production. For me, for week 5, he is a mid to low running back 2 in half PPR, but that ranking does go up a little bit in non-PPR where pass catching is not as important. All right, our third stardom running back of week 5 is going to be Leonard Fournette of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Dolphins, guys, are giving up tons of fantasy points to running backs. So far this season, guys like Devin Singletary and Zach Moss of the Buffalo Bills, Damien Harris of the New England Patriots, Peyton Barber of the Raiders filling in for an injured Josh Jacobs. And they all put up very, very good weeks for fantasy against the Dolphins. And then Jonathan Taylor, who had been struggling a little bit, he wasn't great for fantasy to that point. He played the Miami Dolphins and he had a great bounce back game. So all of those guys have feasted. Now it is Leonard Fournette's turn to feast against this Miami Dolphins defense. He's been the clear starter in Tampa Bay, and unless Bruce Arians, their head coach, surprises us and gives Ronald Jones a sizable workload, Fournette should see plenty of volume and opportunities for production in a good matchup and in a game that the Bucs should be leading the majority of. For me, he is a solid, very solid running back to play this week. All right, I have a couple more running back plays to talk about. There are quite a few running backs I like this week that might be a little bit overlooked. One of them is going to be Damien Williams. So David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears just recently got injured. He's going to be out for a few weeks. Damien Williams was one of the hotter waiver wire pickups. He should be the starter for Chicago while David Montgomery is out. And a lot of people are really high on Damien Williams this week, so this might not come as a surprise. If you picked up Damien Williams, you're already likely playing him or flexing him or considering playing him. I did pick him up in a league where I'm not playing him. He's not a must start for me, but maybe if you're the David Montgomery owner, this is probably someone that you're going to be throwing in the lineup. But he is taking over for David Montgomery, and he should see some solid volume in a pretty good matchup against the Las Vegas Raiders. I expect him to be solid just based on volume alone, and if he's able to get some receptions or maybe get into the end zone, he will be an excellent play. For me, heading into week 5, he is a solid low-end running back 2. All right, now I'm just going to quickly touch on Alexander Mattison. If Dalvin Cook, the starting running back of the Vikings, is out, Alexander Mattison would be the starter for the Vikings, and in a matchup against the Detroit Lions, he would become a smash play. He'd be a low-end running back 1. At bare minimum, he'd be a high running back 2 in a good matchup with the Detroit Lions. In week 3, filling in for Dalvin Cook when he was out, Mattison was 26 for 112 on the ground. He caught 6 of 8 targets for 59 yards. He put up 20.1 half PPR points. So this is only if Dalvin Cook does not play. If Dalvin Cook plays, I'm probably avoiding Alexander Mattison. But if Dalvin Cook is out, Alexander Mattison is someone that you almost have to play unless your team is just, absolutely unbelievably goated. Also, I think I did forget to change this thing from standard to half PPR for a couple players. I'm not positive, but if I did do that, apologies for that. I'll try to remember for the rest of the video. All right, so I just really quickly wanted to talk about Alexander Mattison there, just in case Dalvin Cook is not active. As of this recording, he's currently listed as questionable. But now we're going to move on to a few wide receiver starts before we get into the tight ends, and then I have a few sits of the week as well. We're going to start with Marvin Jones. I do have a couple Jacksonville Jaguar receivers actually to talk about here. The first one we're going to talk about is Marvin Jones. He's coming off of a dud game, but he had been solid all season. As you can see, 16.2, 14.5, 9.2 points. That's very, very solid. All wide receivers do have bad games from time to time, and last week was just one of those games for Marvin Jones. The Jaguars are now without wide receiver DJ Chark, and they get a fantastic matchup in week 5 against the Tennessee Titans, who are giving up the most half-point PPR points to wide receivers. For me this week, he is a solid wide receiver 3 flex play that I could very well see taking a trip to the end zone. And then on the same team, I'm also going to advise you guys to consider starting Laviska Shenault Jr. in that same matchup against the Tennessee Titans. DJ Chark went down early in this week 4 game against the Cincinnati Bengals, and Laviska took advantage. He saw 7 targets, turned it into 6 receptions for 99 yards. He also had 1 carry for 11 yards, it looks like. I think he should see some good volume in this game now that DJ Chark is not there. And like I said with Marvin Jones, this is a great matchup against the Tennessee Titans. And for me, he's also just, another solid wide receiver 3 flex play. Now, I like to remind you guys throughout these videos that just because I'm bringing up someone as a start does not make them a must start, unless I say otherwise, or, if I bring someone up as a sit, maybe there are cases where you don't have better options. And I'm bringing that up because Jamison Crowder is someone that I am comfortable starting heading into week 5 against the Atlanta Falcons for the New York Jets, but he is not necessarily a must start. I do have him in one league where I considered playing him, but I'm not quite going to start him, I don't think. But for me, this is all about volume. He played his first game of the season in week 4 against the Tennessee Titans, and he did make the most of the work that he saw. He saw 9 targets right out the gate, caught 7 of them for 61 yards. He was also able to get in the end zone, put up about 15.5 fantasy points. Now he gets another good matchup with the Atlanta Falcons. So while he's not the most exciting play at wide receiver, and I would not start him over like a bona fide star, super stud wide receiver, he is a great PPR play if you're looking for some stable production. Again, not a must start, but he is a really solid low wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 flex type of play. All right, now we're going to move on to my last 2 starts. We have a couple tight ends to talk about, and it is time to stop ignoring what Dalton Schultz is doing here. The last couple weeks in particular, as you can see, 7 targets, caught 6 for 80 and 2 touchdowns. The next week, 8 targets, caught 6 of them for 58 yards and a touchdown. Listen, I don't expect that type of production to continue, but what we can get out of this type of information here is that he's seeing a good number of targets in a good offense in week 5 against the New York Giants. This projects to be a high-scoring game. While I don't know if he'll get in the end zone or not, that's literally just up to the luck of the draw on a week-to-week basis. He's seeing enough targets where he is at least worth consideration as a tight end. He's just seeing volume and he's making the most of it. He has been great, and now he gets the Giants, who have given up the 4th most points against tight ends, and they haven't even played any super elite tight ends. No Kelsey, no Waller, no guy like that. They played the Denver Broncos, the Washington football team, the Atlanta Falcons, and the New Orleans Saints. Noah Fant for the Broncos is pretty solid. The Falcons have Kyle Pitts. But other than that, Washington has what's his name? Logan Thomas. I almost forgot his name there. Logan Thomas. So even though those guys are solid, they haven't played any superstar tight ends, and the Giants are still giving up a decent amount, quite a bit of points actually, to tight ends. So this week I would fire up Dalton Schultz as a low tight end 1. And our final stardom of week 5 is going to be Kyle Pitts of the Atlanta Falcons. He's seeing targets, as you can see by his target numbers. He's seeing targets, guys. He just hasn't had a breakout game yet. The big thing so far this season, if you look at the touchdown category, a big goose egg. That very well could change this week, though, against the New York Jets, where the Falcons are going to need to rely on Kyle Pitts. Because like I said earlier when talking about Cordarrelle Patterson, the Falcons are going to be without Calvin Ridley and Russell Gage. They're going to have to throw the ball to someone. Maybe the Jets go all out trying to cover Kyle Pitts, but I think they're going to have to somehow get the ball in his hands. And at the very least, I think he'll be a solid play just based on the volume he'll see alone. Even if you look at his numbers so far, while he hasn't had a great game, 5 for 73, 4 for 50, that's not sinking your week at the tight end position. Obviously, you're hoping for more, but you could do worse. But for me this week, I expect him to have hopefully his best game of the season. And he should be a mid tight end 1, at least in my opinion. And also, I don't remember if I moved this to half PPR or not. So there's the half PPR scoring if you're interested. All right, now I only have 3 sit-ems this week, and we're going to start with a quarterback here. We're going to talk about Big Ben Roethlisberger of the Pittsburgh Steelers. He just has not done anything for fantasy so far. He hasn't played well all year. Their offense has looked horrible. Now the Steelers are playing the Denver Broncos, who are giving up the 2nd fewest points to quarterbacks. And this is a game with a very low over-under, meaning that there doesn't project to be a lot of points scored in general. He hasn't thrown more than 1 touchdown pass all season. He's thrown an interception in each of the last 3 games. You look at his fantasy points, this is not going to get it done. So this is someone that I am just staying away from. I really under no circumstances am I starting Ben Roethlisberger. If he has a good game on my bench, okay. It's just way too risky to put him out there right now. And I think risky is a great word to also describe the proposition of starting Myles Gaskin, running back of the Miami Dolphins, this week in week 5 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I've talked about it literally all season long. The running backs against Tampa Bay, they very rarely do anything. Even Ezekiel Elliott struggled against them. Now, Myles Gaskin gets to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I do not project him to be the one that breaks the trend of the Buccaneers shutting down opponents' running games. And even if he was seeing a full workload like he had been, earlier in the season, I would still be worried. But last week, he only played 12 snaps and he saw only 2 carries for 3 yards. So you got problems with the matchup. He saw almost no volume last week. I'm not really sure what that's about, but at this point, he is way too risky to start this week just based on his projected volume and the matchup. And our final player that we're going to talk about in this video is Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears. I am leaning towards sitting him this week against the Las Vegas Raiders. Look, guys, I don't like it either. Allen Robinson is a great player, and I wish he was relevant for fantasy, but so far he has done nothing, absolutely nothing through 4 weeks in fantasy football. Justin Fields is starting at quarterback again, which is not a good thing, and I just don't think there will be enough passing volume to rely on Allen Robinson confidently. Even Darnell Mooney, the other kind of starting Chicago Bears wide receiver, is seeing more targets. He had a decent game last week, but yeah, the Raiders are also, in addition to just the volume concerns, the Raiders are also giving up the 5th fewest points to wide receivers. So you might see the Raiders and think of them as a weak defense. Now they're giving up the 5th fewest points to wide receivers. They just shut down Mike Williams and Keenan Allen last week against the Chargers. That's an example that comes to mind. So the matchup isn't even good. Allen Robinson is talented enough where he could always have a good game any given week. But even if he gets in the end zone this week against the Raiders, I'm not even sure you'll be happy with his final stat line, even if he gets a touchdown. We can point actually to week 2, where he had 2 receptions for 24 yards and a touchdown, finished with 9.4 half PPR points. Like, that's okay, but you're not, thrilled about that, especially for someone that scored a touchdown. So personally, you guys can do what you want, but I am going to sit him until we see a sign of life from him and the Chicago Bears offense. You can start him if you want to at your own risk, but for me, he's a wide receiver 3 at best, but he comes with a ton of bust potential. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Those are all my startums and situms heading into week 5 of the 2021 fantasy football season. Thank you guys for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel for more fantasy football content, and I'll see you guys later. Peace out.